Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the stream. We're going to continue some painting tonight. We're going to work on the shadow pass for our redesign of this spooky character from the real Ghostbusters cartoon. If you guys have been following along, there's been a lot of episodes thus far. So if you're wondering how we got to this point, definitely go check out some of the previous recordings. They're all going to be in the live section on my YouTube channel. But otherwise, let's jump into this thing and see how far we can get tonight. All right, let's see. We've got our guy here. Now I'm going to turn off these colors so we can see a little bit better what we're doing with these shadows. And we had just gotten through all of this pumpkin leaf madness. So luckily we're moving on now to some things that might be feel a little less tedious, perhaps. I don't know. I guess we'll find out, right? And now what we do also occasionally is we turn off our shadows so we can see a little bit of the line art as well in case we need some clarification, but I think that's all looking good. You know what we should do is we should make a color mask for ourselves so I can select regions easily. Now, maybe I already had that and I'm just forgetting, but I don't see it in my layers here. So, yeah, see, now I can grab that arm and I can. Hey, how's it going? Thank you. I appreciate that. We can go in here and we can give some just broad cylindrical shading to this arm just to get us started here. A little bit of shadow underneath his ripped shirt. Sure, that looks all right. And now there is going to be quite a bit of weird organic detail in here. I kind of wanted it to feel sort of, I think I might have used the term swamp thing when I was first drawing this. And I still would like to capture a little bit of that quality here. So, yeah, we're going to spend some time on this arm, make sure it's looking really cool. And all the while attempting to retain a sense of those bigger forms, right? We don't want to lose the bigger forms, even though we're working on some smaller forms. If you guys are working on anything creative, good luck. Remember to save often. I try to. I recently heard a story. I think where was this? It was at my school somewhere. Somebody lost some work. They had a corrupted file, and that sucks. It can happen. Although I feel like it's well, I guess knock on wood, I don't really see that happen too much in terms of full file corruption. But I also try to be like on top of computer maintenance and usually cautious about changing, updating versions of things. I'm sure, as you guys know, updating Windows is usually a really bad idea, which sucks because they're supposed to be good for security reasons, but it usually wreaks havoc on everything else that my computer has to do. And so I'm not a huge fan of being a beta tester for Microsoft on that front. So I usually give it a little time before I jump into a new version of something. I was using Photoshop CS6 for an eternity, like many, many years after it was already extinct. I was still using that thing. And kind of, I guess, on a similar note, you guys at this point know that I use a non-screen based tablet to draw, and that might also, to some, seem very sort of old school, antiquated. But it's interesting to me that more and more I'm seeing younger artists who start on a screen tablet start to have neck, shoulder pain, back issues, and first thing I recommend is try switching to a regular tablet. You can do all of your art without your hand being in the way, and you can do it in a much more ergonomic sort of position, right? You don't have to be leaned over anything. You don't have a hot screen melting your face off. That's never fun. There is, of course, the hurdle of getting used to a non screen tablet, but kind of glad I got used to it back when screen tablets weren't even a thing. And I'm working on an Intuos medium sized tablet here, but if I'm at a desk that has a little bit more space to it, I actually like the Intuos large because it just kind of allows you to have better gesture to your movements. You know, your arm can kind of you can get your shoulder into the movement, and for anyone who's done like figure drawing and large format drawing with things like charcoals and stuff, it's really cool to get that sort of shoulder movement in what you're doing. So a larger tablet gives you a little bit more room to breathe, and that's super nice, but you do have to have the space for it. But all of them are easier to work with though than a screen tablet, right? Because now you've got to figure out, well, where's my keyboard and where's my regular monitor? Do I even have a regular monitor? Is it just my screen tablet? Trust me, I speak from experience. I've had many screen tablets over the years and wrestled with ergonomics with all of them. And ultimately, they end up kind of just gathering dust because the regular tablet is so much more convenient for me. But I do try to draw traditionally so that I don't get totally used to having my hand disconnected from what I'm looking at when I'm drawing. Like that can get a little weird if all you're doing is drawing on the tablet. So I guess there's pros and cons to any sort of setup you have, but this one, I don't know, seems to work pretty good for me. Okay, so I got some veins in here. You can see kind of crazy, weird organic details going on. This kind of was talking about with the swamp thing sort of vibe, like some weird, almost root like veins happening. And we can go in and we can continue to refine this and tweak this, but I feel like we've got like at least a decent start in the look we want. And one of the things you want to think about with this is how do I create a little bit of uh, variety in how much detail there is. Like that whole management of ratios and visual rest and all that. You don't want to have the same amount of crunchy stuff going on all the way through the arm. So I'm attempting to kind of make it a little more dense down here in the elbow area, and then as we get closer toward the wrist, it kind of tapers away. It gets a little simpler. We might even soften a little bit of the shadows here or deepen the shadows here to enhance the sense of contrast and gradation from the elbow outward. And then we'll get to the hand, and then the hand, of course, will have some detail as well. So, like the placement of this stuff at first glance is going to seem random, and it kind of is, but there is a sort of a global strategy to it. And that's the nice thing about rules of design is that things that maybe otherwise felt very arbitrary suddenly have guidelines. you have things that you can sort of follow to know that if I do it this way, it's going to be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. But yeah, this stuff here, this is some of my favorite stuff to render because it's very organic and sculptural and a lot of subtle transitions you're inventing, getting your eye to move from one form into the next. Super fun. I tend to like drawing mechanical things more than rendering mechanical things. I think because there's maybe a little bit less to be resolved in the render of a hard surface design. And the line art kind of tells you what's going on for the most part. There can be some subtle things going on, but all the solving and invention is in the line art. And then once that's over, it sort of feels like you kind of have to go on autopilot. I'm just somebody who has to have like a little bit of kind of creative design stimulation throughout the process, which is why sometimes I'll not even do clean line art for the subject. I'll just do some shadows and kind of sculpt my way through it. Depends on how much precision I need. So here we're starting to get into this hand render here, start to get into these fingers. And I guess we're gonna have kind of a dark spot here, right? And then I don't know that I think the drawing is a little weak in this spot right here. We were a little bit, because like this, the placement of this knuckle feels weird. Well, that might be a liquefy for later. Tweak that a little bit. That's okay. With these sort of like, I don't know what you call them, like kind of creepy hands or ghoulish hands. I like to kind of emphasize the. Oh, we forgot the nail there. Okay, should be like a little fingernail. I like to kind of emphasize the boniness, the knuckles, and the hard versus soft areas. I mean, you should do that a little bit with sort of all hand paintings and drawings, but in the case of a creepy hand like this, you can really push some of that stuff. And just kind of remembering that there's the kind of spine of the finger here. Let's see if I can quickly do something here. It's going to be weird. I'm going to do it on a new layer. You're thinking about the spine of the finger. Here's like a knuckle. Here's a knuckle. Here's the sort of big knuckle where it connects to the hand. This is like the spine of the finger, right? And you got your nail here, and then you have this sort of doughy underside. And so there's a form transition here at this edge, right? You get this sort of thing going on. Again, I'm exaggerating here for the sake of explaining it, but you get hard here and you get soft here. So if you want to really emphasize like the boniness of the hand, if that makes it feel creepier or whatever, more ghoulish, then you really want to capture the separation between the spinal element of the finger and the soft doughy part. Also, hands like older people's hands, people who are when you have thinner skin, the skin kind of sags and it reveals the boniness, the skeleton much more clearly. And so that can be another reason why, like maybe you're doing like an old witch's hand or something. That's another reason to show some of the boniness there too. But if you're doing like an ogre or like a demon or something and you want their bone structure to feel massive and heavy, that's another potential reason for you to kind of emphasize some of these aspects. Just realized I'm painting on the wrong layer here. Let's hide that. Paint that back in. There we go. Cut that out. I was like, why does the shadows look a little bit gray? Because they were gray. Yeah, so there's a little bit of weirdness there that we probably want to just slice away. Let's see if we can fix that actually. Let's see if I can go in here. First of all, let's lock this layer. And let's lock that layer. And let's kill the skin here. And let's fill this in here with the bandages on the scythe handle. And there we go. It's looking a little better. It's actually funny. These are the sort of things where like AI might miss something like this, right? Like you notice like as it hallucinates things kind of like weirdly merge together, right? It doesn't create clear separation, logical separation in places, unless it's doing an extra good job of stealing good art, but it usually falls short. And those are some of the weird little things you can kind of look for, things merging together unexpectedly. All right, so let's go into this handle here. And now I'm working on the hand. I just said I'm going to go to the handle, but I'm like a squirrel over here seeing an acorn in the distance, immediately distracted. Okay, handle time. Again, just get some of the large form working. I'm going to give a little bit of a cylindrical quality to things. I'm being careful not to halo the form too much. If the lighting is off axis, then we have justification to have some haloing. But at a certain point, it's going to create a flattening effect. So we want to be just careful about that. And typically, you're going to want some asymmetrical weighting to any kind of broader shape like this. So we might do a little heavier kind of under the bottom here, and then we might keep it a little lighter over here. Again, we're still using a little bit, implying a bit of off-axis ambience, but it's helping us understand that shape. The good thing is with these shadows on their own layer, if we get further in the render and we look at that, and we think, yeah, the haloing there is just too strong. It's flattening things out. We can come in here and we can surgically tweak that if we need to. Another thing is some of these bandages want to feel kind of dirty and damaged and kind of cut up. And it's not something that I might totally do in the shadow pass. It might be better to just leave it to some texture work at the end because it's such small detail. So when you're working, you might want to think about your process not only in the phase that you're currently in, right, but think about what is happening in the next phase and what is maybe better done later. Where can I maybe save a lot of time if I just save it for another step. All right, cool. See you later. I was just talking to a student today about I was relating artistic sensibilities to like chess moves, right? Like chess masters think X number of steps ahead versus a person who's just a basic beginner at chess like me. I think maybe one or two moves ahead, right? And in art, it's like really the same thing, right? Like a really advanced artist is thinking way more steps ahead than you are, especially when their process is super nailed down because they can envision all the future steps. There's no guesswork there, right? So it's like they have the bandwidth in the moment to think ahead, but they also can envision the future accurately, right? So there's sort of two aspects to that, and all of that just comes with experience, right? Kim Jung Gi could think ahead so far that he could just sort of see the entire image in his head first, um, or a lot of it, right? To us as viewers, it looked like most of that was already figured out, and there was some, as he was going, he was figuring out, but he did put some emphasis on sort of pre-visualizing what to put down, and he did do that, but he did it so rapidly that it never looked like he was spending much time having to do it. But that was part of his whole philosophy was, just give it a moment, right? Think about what you're making. Don't just lay down some random lines and hope that they turn out to make sense. But everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses, and those evolve over time, and it's really just figuring out, what process helps me identify my weaknesses and work on them efficiently. How do I kind of weed those out and destroy those weaknesses as quick as I can? And another thing I was mentioning to a different student today was the uh, the helpful nature of traditional art in that it's harder for you to correct your mistakes, and that environment promotes a lot of pre-visualization, right? It also promotes a refinement to your process. So some really advantageous things to working in a medium that you can't erase. If you can always undo your mistakes, then you never have to acknowledge them, right? You never really get better at them. You're always just making the same mistake, undoing it and fixing it. And the act of just that, right? That series of steps of doing it wrong, undoing it, doing it again can become a habit. And all of those sort of micro faults in the moment feel very minimal, but then imagine them being done, 5,000 times across a painting. Well, now it's like, well, why does my stuff look crappy compared to other people? It's like, well, I don't know. If you add up all those little cuts, right? Death by a thousand tiny cuts. That might be something to think about. So this gnarled wooden handle here, I think, has a similar sort of fun sculptural vibe to it, like the arm and the hand had. Kind of enjoying getting in here and inventing a little bit of weird information. And then regarding that kind of notion of making sure you don't have too much detail everywhere, one of the tricky things about that is how do you make areas that are simpler still feel designed and considered? Like, how do you make sure they don't feel forgotten or um, out of place, incomplete, right? Like all those things are potentially a problem with an area of visual rest that you create. And the way I kind of deal with that is adding some detail, but making sure that it's low relief detail, maybe very thin detail, micro texture. Those are great things to put into those areas of visual rest. It'll look like you've thought about it, you've considered it carefully, but it'll still allow it to exist as a place of visual rest. So we can duplicate our shadows again just to kind of see a little more clearly if we're getting everything resolved well. And yeah, I think that's looking cool. You can see that arm definitely has some cool character. Now I feel like maybe some of this stuff gets a little dark in this center area here. We can leave the detail. I want to still be able to see it, but I'm going to maybe minimize it just a bit. And the reason for that is kind of going back to what I said before is that we want these small shapes to live on the bigger shape, and the bigger shape is that cylinder. And in the center of the cylinder here, we want that to kind of feel lit, and then it kind of wraps. These forms wrap around the cylinder, and as they wrap around to the sides, that's when we start to see a little bit more shadow going on. And so, to complement erasing a little bit of the center, we can sort of double down on some of the shadows on the sides here. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, yeah. See that's got a lot more dimension to it, right? It's a subtle tweak, but gosh, it's just crazy how many little sort of nuanced choices and tricks there are to doing just an ambient shadow pass well. And it just feels like I'm always learning new things, right? Like it's just never ending. But those are just a few things that I've found kind of help it out a little bit. And and then just making sure that you're exploring the half tones enough as well. Don't rely on the diffuse reflection entirely to solve those issues. Put a couple little dark bits in there for areas between the fingers. Look for T intersections, or we're going to have maybe a nice little gathering of shadow. it's tricky to think nonlinear. That's kind of the secret is thinking is kind of establishing this stuff in a nonlinear way, and it's not easy. This is more just sort of design training. Like your instinct as just a human is going to be to put things in a grid, right? Like you're gonna space things evenly. You're gonna want to put something in every space and space it out. This is just how we kind of organize our life, our brain, the world around us. This is kind of the deal. But the problem is that this is the enemy of design, right? Like it's the enemy of emphasis. It's the enemy of flow, of making an interesting statement, and it happens to also be the enemy of good lighting because things that are even also feel flat. I guess you could be intentionally making flat looking art. So I guess there's that. I'm always speaking from the angle of representational, sculptural design work, kind of entertainment design oriented stuff. Certainly in the world of something like fine art, you can do whatever the hell you want. You could just, I don't know, dip hot dogs in red paint and throw it at a tree, and then that could be your art. It's not what I'm into. The other thing for a good value pass is, of course, comparative analysis. I'm always looking at something and thinking, well, this area is this dark, and I am intending it to feel like it is this sort of shape. Well, why is maybe this shape over here, which I want to feel the same way using a different value, and then I'll go in and I'll correct it, right? And that's kind of, you want to be doing that sort of continuously all throughout the process. Like if we made a choice to make it this dark here where these intersect, well then, why aren't we doing that elsewhere, right? That inconsistency starts to erode the realism of the piece. Here we're trying to be sculptural about these blocky forms, and I'm using that 1, 2, 3 read as a general strategy here. And sometimes that requires a little bit of clever gradient usage so that it still agrees with the lighting of the scene. I'm kind of curious what's going on with this little bit here. I feel like I'm not totally certain what I was going for there, but I guess it's just kind of like a little filigree on the end piece. Okay, sure. Cool. I guess, yeah, should we move up to the top? Let's go to the top of the scythe here. And now I have to think about how this needs to read. So maybe we'll do a little bit of a darker edge on this side. Kind of dither that very quickly so that we don't end up making it look um, lit improperly. This one's an easy choice in here. We get some shadow in the crevice there. A little bit of gradient for this edge. And then since we're using light on this edge, we're going to go to a darker value on this side. And this is getting lighter on this side. So what we're doing is we're sort of building an area of contrast here at the apex where the form sticks out closest to the viewer by kind of positioning our gradient, our most contrasting part of the gradients against each other at that area. Some of that's like if you've ever painted little wargaming miniatures, you'll be familiar with things like staining and dry brushing. And all that is in an effort to help us see the forms more clearly. And we do that by sort of darkening the crevices and then brightening all of the edges that stick out. And the staining is in essence sort of an ambient occlusion pass. Got a fun moment here where we can do a little bit of skull rendering. Always have fun rendering a skull out. Something else that can be tricky is just trying to talk while you're painting. It's easy to zone out and kind of lose your train of thought. Try to minimize that as much as I can. it occurs to me that the perspective of some of these thicknesses are a little bit weird, right? Because if we want this thing to look like it's coming towards us, you guys probably get what I'm going for here. But yeah, if this thing is coming towards us like this, um, we're seeing the front sides of these surfaces, not the back sides, right? So that's just a weird thing that I sort of, I guess, didn't think about in the line art as accurately as I should have. I know when we get to this stuff, though, this is actually just supposed to feel blade like, so we don't really need to think about thickness. But as it gets closer to the connection to the handle, that's something we do want to consider. And I think we might see a little bit here. Oops, I'm on the wrong layer. Yeah, I think we'll see a little bit of this. Is it just how that kind of turns back in on us? But this one, I think we might just leave that. This one, I certainly don't want to do. And then I think at this point, we may see the front, but yeah, I think it's probably blade like enough at that point to where we wouldn't really notice thickness. So we'll go ahead and leave that alone. Now I'm questioning if maybe there should have been something here, right? Because if there's I feel like there should be either skin there or handle there. And if I read this line here, it's close, right? Let's fill that in with skin. I think that's probably the way I'll go here. Oh, is that interesting? Okay, yeah. So we're just gonna fill that in. Let's make sure we get the right color sampled. And then we'll fill this part in right here. And on our mask, we have to make sure we include that all now in the masking area that we can paint shadows in there. Yeah, I think that there's probably like a little bit of a hole there that we would ultimately want, but I'm just going to kind of leave that alone for the moment. That's something that we could easily just jab a hole in when we get to the collapse version of the render. Feels like maybe we got a little bit dark in here, but it might be fine. Okay, kind of doing comparative analysis here. We feel like we're getting the same level of darkness for that type of recess. I think we're pretty close. You want to maybe get a little bit more shadow underneath this section here. I think I just want all these to be a little bit dark, like they're all sort of stained and inset. So let's just lasso these and give them a bit of shadow. Okay. Okay, let's these are going to be kind of a pain, these little little strings. So I think for that, I'm going to use a mask to help us isolate. Build the shadow on that, and then give him a bit of form. Oops. In the grand scheme of things, you may not really notice the shadow, but while I'm in here and I'm zoomed in on this section, I'm just going to do it. It's easy enough. I suppose this is going to be pretty dark in here, so just go for it. Okay. It's hand rendering time. This is a fun hand. I like that pose of that hand. It's really got a lot of fun energy in it. Okay, I think it's a pretty good initial stab at that hand there. Let's get these nails rendered with some forms as well. Oh, yeah, there we go. Much better. I realize we have some little carvings on this one that we forgot to do. Suppose you could try to do like a layer style for this, like a bevel emboss, but these shapes are chunky and simple enough to where it's easy to hand paint them. But if you were doing some really intricate filigree and you wanted to kind of see those forms pop as you painted them, I've definitely used a layer style for that kind of thing in the past. It can be fun to see uh, your paint strokes look like they have thickness to them as you paint. It kind of reminds me of like I don't know, like a painting with a glue gun or puffy paints. If you guys remember those from the early '90s, dating myself, but yes, I have in the past decorated a sweatshirt with puffy paints before. It was sort of like the equivalent of like bedazzling something before bedazzling was a thing. It was puffy painting stuff. Maybe I'll give a little more form to these wraps here. I feel like they're a little lacking. Oops. The rendering in this piece is a little bit further than you might go for a concept piece, depending on what exactly the client wants and what the project demands and where this might be seen and all that. The maybe the importance of the design, but a lot of concepts don't need this kind of intricate rendering, right? Like we're kind of having fun here in terms of just hanging out on YouTube and painting and just doing cool stuff. And it's my place to not worry about a client needing something on time, which is cool. But yes, I like saying that because if you're somebody who's looking at this and thinking, man, is this really all this work for just a single character concept? And sometimes, sometimes, I mean, likely though in a production, there would be way more time spent on like earlier iteration. We don't really have a client, so I'm just sort of designing what I think is interesting. And I do spend some time sketching and thumbnailing, but I don't maybe go through the same level of rigor that you might go through working with a studio or a client on something. You might have a lot more thumbnails. You might have a lot more rounds of sketching. So that's definitely stuff to consider. Okay, now here we go on the ambient occlusion for the rear cloak. One of those kind of big moments to start making forms pop. It's very exciting. Actually, let me see if I can see what the edge looks like here. Okay. Great. Now, is there a bit that's folded over here? There is. So maybe we should try to show a little bit of that. Let's see, what did I do there? I guess I went kind of in there, and then we came out again. Oh boy. I need to first limit it to this. There we go. Now I need to deselect this section. And now I can paint. Perfect. Okay, good. And then we can give a little bit of a shape to the outside. A little bit of that cylindrical quality. Now let's get this part working. Again, I'm going to try to think a little bit about some cylindrical shading there for a big shape. Now we can go in and we can start to striate this with all of the various folds and wrinkles, but maybe I'll do a little bit here first. Ooh, we forgot about that little piece behind the hourglass. There we go. And for this, I think we'll maybe go with some smoothing to help. I think I want this a little smaller. Yeah, there we go. Let's go with another one here. Little one there. Okay, now let's do this section. I'm still going to have the smoothing on so I can get some nice controlled curves. And we're going to accidentally hide the image. That's great. There we go. We're back. Let's try that again. Get our selection. Okay, so this kind of curves in here. Okay. So we'll go with a subtle shadow. Whoa. Whoa, what are you doing? Don't go crazy on me. This is curving. Oh, I see. I see what I did. Okay, got it, got it, got it. Trying to interpret my lines here. It's tricky sometimes. We did all these fun pipe folds down here, and now we're having to contend with all of them. But it's going to be a really important thing to have in here because otherwise this is going to feel really flat and unrealistic. And as we render this, we can kind of observe like, okay, does it feel like maybe there's too much or too little folds going on? I think I'm generally liking most of that. Let's see if we get a little bit more. Make sure we don't get that sleeve there. And now we can take a smudge tool and we can kind of play around a little bit with these. Obscure them just slightly. Apply a little bit of, like uneven buckling to the fabric. So we don't want this to look like it's some kind of princess gown or something. It's got to look like it's a little kind of just disheveled and worn and battered. Yeah, let's turn our smoothing off and then we can just kind of refine some of this edge work in here. Get a little bit of shape on this outer piece. A little bit on this piece. And we're going to have to play around with lighting to get this hand to come forward enough. It's just not going to pop enough, I don't think, with what we have there. So it's just a challenge for us to deal with as we polish it up. No big deal. Also, the perfection of these edges is just right now in this sort of phase of layering. But when we get this merged together, it could be a whole pass where we can come in here and we can sort of tatter these edges and make them look really messed up, and that'll be fun. We did a little bit of the line work here for this sleeve, but some of the stuff down here, yeah, it just makes sense to do that more toward the end of the process. All right, let's see if we can get in here and enhance just a few more of these shadows where there is some intersections. And let's do this as well. Let's go to the background, and I'm going to add a bit of ambient shadow underneath the character. And to do that, I'm going to create a new multiply. And we'll just kind of bring in some of that shadow. Now it's going to look a little weird because we haven't done shadows on these roots yet, but it gives us a good sense of that shape there. Now, if lighting's coming kind of from the front, we need to think about maybe kind of limiting how far this spreads for certain areas. We can kind of tinker with that later, but just wanted to get a general soft shadow underneath the character and a little bit of section so we get a sense of him in a physical space, right? Like we need to start envisioning this as a thing that is in an environment. Not that we're going to paint an environment, but we're going to still think of him as if he's in a physical space. So a shadow like this can really help you visualize. So let's do the roots now. I think that's the next logical place to go. And I think for this, what we'll do is I'm going to turn off contiguous so we can just select all of the roots. Get some shadow from the robe down onto the base of the root. Here I'm going to focus mostly on shadow where it connects with the ground. And we might get on these bigger roots a little bit of secondary form just to kind of keep it interesting. These roots are fun to paint. very organic and sort of relaxing to get in here and define all these little shapes. I think based on the rate that we are going here, I think we're going to definitely finish all of our ambient shadows tonight. That's exciting. And then we have a little bit of a choose your own adventure for the next step. We can go into putting in a key light. We can do some textures. We can do some reflections. We'll kind of see how I'm feeling about it. I think we might do textures. That tends to bring a lot of fun life to the image. We might also do just a little bit of along with textures, I usually do things like gradients or just general color variation. We have just flat colors right now, which are not that interesting or special. And so I think textures sort of include color variation in the texture pass. I think we may have done a little bit already on the pumpkin head. I know we looked ahead a little bit with that area. Can't remember what we did there, but now we'll try to have like a comprehensive pass on that. I don't know if you guys saw, but I guess there was some kind of art contest. I think it might have been like a tablet manufacturer, or maybe it was like a clip studio thing. Yeah, don't quote me on that. I don't remember who was putting on. It was some kind of brand, well-known art brand was putting on an art contest, and I guess apparently some person used AI and then tried to fake it. Like they like they let the computer just make the image for them, and then after the fact they like traced it and they did like a quick, they basically tried to show that they had like an art process. And crazy enough that they won the art contest and fooled all the judges, which for me calls into question if there were any real art judges in there to begin with, because anyone looking at the art, you could see that there's definitely some weird stuff going on. But that's I think unfortunately fairly common is that art contests are run by people who have no business running an art contest. Um, and it's why typically I don't really bother with that stuff. And it's sad because there's sometimes some cool like cash prizes, or you get maybe some recognition or something. So I mean, there's reasons to do it. I'm not telling you not to, but just for me personally, reason I don't is because I never knew who the heck is running it. Right? Like, could be just a bunch of clowns running it, and apparently there were for this contest, and we would have never known unless this kind of like silly AI thing had exposed them for their lack of judgment skills. So if you enter a contest and you don't do so well, um, always try to look at ways to improve, but then also think about what did the landscape look like and who was running the contest. And those are things that you just have to consider. Um, you definitely want to consider your audience. So if you're, entering like a, I don't know, some kind of like cute anime girl contest or something, right? Don't come in there with like your Frank Frazetta take on an anime girl, right? Like that, the audience is not going to receive that well. I mean, it might be an amazing piece. Sounds cool to me. I'd like to see that, right? But those people are going to think that it looks really stupid, probably, even though artistically it might be great. So you just have to kind of think about some of those factors. I know it's kind of a bummer, but you think, well, it's an art contest, and so I'm gonna there's gonna be artists looking at this, and kind of uh being able to appreciate and react to all of my artistic decisions I'm making. No, there is no guarantee that that's happening at all. A kind of an interesting story. Many years ago, I entered a Gnomon school contest. It was for some kind of like illustrative, do your sort of spin on a classic fairy tale. I did my take on Beauty and the Beast, and I did sort of like it's kind of a darker twist on it, more horrific. I mean, you guys know me. I tend to like darker subject matter, and so the Beast I made more demonic, and I mean, it's the piece is when I look back on it, I've grown so much since then, right? So it's hard to look back at it, but yeah, at the time, in the landscape of who had entered and everything, I ended up winning, and I remember before I had turned it in, typically as you do, you would ask art friends like, "Hey, can you look at this and give me some thoughts? Like, what do you think? Is it all right? Like, am I way off base?" And people have different opinions, right? Different artists have different thoughts. Some people I showed it to were like, "Yeah, it looks cool. Maybe tweak this or that." And I remember one of the people I showed the piece to was Paul Richards, which hopefully you guys know who Paul Richards is. and and I guess for this story to make sense, you have to know Paul and his style. But his feedback to me was you should really change a lot of the creature's design, the beast's design, because it's kind of boring. And and he kind of went in and he like gave me a quick liquefy suggestion of like I would do this and I would do that, and it was like dramatic changes, um and all of the reasoning behind it made a lot of sense. But it also kind of pulled it out of the particular sort of style and look I was going for, which again, you might say like, well, were you going for a boring style? I mean, maybe, but there was a little bit of sort of like a realism aspect that I was kind of aiming for, and Paul's stuff, there tends to be a lot of push and pull with shapes, and he wrenches things as much as they possibly can go, before they break, and then that kind of gives him his signature sort of look, really really fun shapes going on. And that was kind of his take on the beast. I ended up not doing any of those changes. Again, I still won, but it's an example of how depending on your audience, right, or who you ask, there's going to be a little bit of a different opinion here and there. So try to gather like I guess like a collection of feedback, and also consider who your audience is. That particular contest, you didn't really have people entering with really really extreme sort of stylized design shapes. It was all a little bit more grounded looking, which, yeah, definitely could see some people saying it was kind of a boring approach. But he's great though as a inspirational point of design reference. Really incredible stuff. Well, we're cruising along here on these darn roots. These roots are kind of kicking our butt here. So many of these darn things. Who drew all these in here? We should probably report them right away. I guess we were trying to be clever here and have this root kind of curling around our staff. All right, sure. Does take quite a lot of self control to stick with a phase of an image all the way through, especially if it's one that it's a kind of more dense image and there's just a lot of this sort of shadow rendering going on. Because you get to like finishing shadows on the head or something, an important piece, and you really want to see, how does that area look as we get further along, right? Hey, Patrick, how's it going? Yeah, it's going good, dude. We're just fiddling with this silly Halloween guy here. Nice, nice. Get your creative juices flowing, man. Okay, I guess there's a little bit of, if I want to be super thorough about these shadows, I guess we maybe see a little bit kind of in between some of those. I'm being so ridiculous right now, like no one's gonna notice that. All right. Maybe we'll do. Yeah, I'll save that. Okay, so hourglasses, I guess, is the last thing. These are going to be quick though because they're so. Where's our brush? Here it is. They're so small, right? That we just need to kind of give it a little bit of a cylindrical sort of shading. Get a little bit of this backside shadowed. Yeah, we could come in here and we could probably render some of this stuff a little bit, but I'm not going to go crazy with this. I'm glad it's looking spooky. That is definitely the goal. And yes, I will notice, and that, as you know, is the curse of all artists, that you see all of your own flaws, all of your own things that you wish you'd done that you didn't do. That's just how it goes. It's why and then this is, I think, true of probably every artist, right? It's like, uh, my house, like, not, my art is nowhere in my house. I have one of my pieces hung up in my house, one, and it's like an old painting, and I have it up not because I think it looks great. It's just because it has kind of a history to it. It's the only piece, and obviously I painted, thousands of pictures at this point, and I've got other art up in my house because I don't need to be looking at my own stuff, right? I'm just going to be constantly looking at all the problems it has. Instead, let's look at some other artists. Let's look at some great people that I don't know the mistakes they made because they're more advanced than me. It looks perfect to me. I got a bunch of let's see, who do I have up? I have some Alphonse Mucha. I have some JC Leyendecker. I have some Jerome. I have some Bouguereau. I know it sounds kind of lame. Like, aren't those just like standard museum paintings? There's a reason that they're famous. I'll just say that. There is a reason. There's a cool site that you can subscribe to that they're all about the preservation of old art in digital form. So they go and they try to take really, really high res, color accurate photos of old paintings. And by becoming a member, you support the effort to kind of archive that stuff, but then you also get access to all their photography. So what I do is I go on that site and find the paintings that I want, and then I download them. I kind of go in Photoshop, just make sure that they're as sharp as they need to be, and then I order them on a canvas printing site. I have them print them out on canvas for me, and I hang them up. And it's kind of like I have my own little museum in my house. So I can walk around and I can sort of be inspired at any moment, which is cool. That'd be nice if I could like rotate and have them change all the time, but we're not quite living in that world yet. Maybe one day when energy is like infinitely abundant and incredibly cheap. You had them as a wallpaper, yeah, that can be cool. Like those are things that you can kind of cycle through. If you get tired of it, right? You look at it for a little bit and then you put it away. Yeah, it's a good call. All right. See, I told you guys these would go fast. These are easy. The hard part was drawing these, right? Now that we have the shape in place, it's no big deal. Just trying to give a little bit of form to this area. I want to get some of the shape to read, but I don't know that anybody, again, I guess here I go again with the nobody's going to notice, but I'll notice. So that's why we're doing it. Yeah, Patrick, I saw you were doing some cool paintings, man. Those are looking awesome, dude. A lot of crazy detail going on. Yeah, rendering is fun for you. Yeah. Let's see. I do like it's interesting. I do enjoy rendering the shadows. I'm flip-flopping in my head here all over the place. I really like rendering shadows. Sculptural ambient shadows are a particular favorite of mine. And it's a good thing because they are very time consuming and you're stuck in that process for a while if you're really trying to go for a high fidelity render. So I guess it's just good that it's a sort of a saving grace that I actually like that process because again it's kind of requires a lot of endurance and patience with it. And so it's weird. I almost have kind of like a bittersweet relationship with ambient shadows because I like them, but they're always the slow burnout part of the image. I think key shadows for me are really fun. They're really impactful because they have a sort of sculptural, clarifying nature, but they're much quicker, I think, to establish than ambient shadows are. Like I feel like they just require a little bit less fiddliness, right? Like you don't have to get quite as detailed with them. It's more like making really good big graphic decisions about stuff. It either works or it doesn't work, right? You kind of know immediately whether you're making the right shape or not when you zoom out. So I feel like they're descriptive and therefore rewarding the way ambient shadows are, but they're just way more sort of easily blocked in. Um, Funny enough, colors I find to be visually rewarding, but very like annoying in terms of process because it feels like it's something that like the computer could almost just do for me, right? Like, okay, look at my line art. I'm gonna just pick an area. I want you to like look at the outline and be like, yeah, this is like a belt shape. All right, let me just give you the belt shape. Let's fill that in. I feel like there could be a little bit of computer assisted selection stuff going on there that would be nice. I just feel like I waste a lot of time having to do sort of like like I think almost like technical stuff that's not really adding a lot to the image. It's like an unnecessary time sink. It's kind of like with 3D, like unwrapping is just awful. And it's like, but I need to unwrap to make these textures look right. So I guess we're gonna do that. Now I know there's weird shortcuts, but if you're talking about doing like correct, you know, game model textures, then you really gotta go in there and do at least finesse your UVs, depending on what it is, right? Some things you can get away with kind of junky UVs, but a lot of times you probably want to be hand tweaking that stuff. You like unwrapping? Well, what do you is it's all unwrapping or is it like specific things you like unwrapping? Because I find that also it depends on the subject matter. It kind of changes how the unwrapping goes. Like if you're unwrapping a face, it's like, all right, cool. I like define the pelt seams and then I hit pelt and it pulls it out and it's pretty fun. Um, versus maybe something where it's like, oh, this is like a really complex, weird shape, and I don't know where to put the seams. I guess the seams don't really maybe matter as much these days with engines and their sort of fidelity and everything. Back when I did production 3D, I just it was very unforgiving. Like if you had a UV seam in the wrong spot, there under certain lighting, that thing is going to show up and it's going to look awful. So, and I was also production 3D modeler when you didn't have as many sort of automated aspects to it as well. Like, yeah, Z remeshing things, for example, didn't exist. So, retopoing and just, yeah, there's a lot of like very technical processes to get something to work right in game. But, it's still very enjoyable. Like, I love seeing all that stuff come together. It's like all of these very laborious stages pouring over the sculpt and then the unwrap and then the textures and then the shaders and then you know and then ultimately somebody rigs it up and animates it and then somebody records a voice line for it and then it's all worth it, right? You're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, it's like they're alive. When you worked on hard surface models for Hunt Showdown, it was kind of like a puzzle game to make it efficient and optimize it as best you could. What do you mirror? What's for tiling textures? Yep, yep. Yeah, yes, yes, that's why yes, that's very true. I like my 2D process to be, it's very influenced by a sort of 3D pipeline. Because that's kind of like it makes sense to me, like the passes that the object goes through the 3D object. It's like, okay, yeah, I can do that. I can understand that. We have these different lights, and we've got different kinds of reflections. We have different types of material properties like that. I can work that out. It's really just all in an effort to be able to visualize something that's imaginary without reference material, right? Like, I mean, you can have inspiration, but um, I can't go hire a model that's gonna, make some crazy pumpkin outfit and it's like it's absurd, right? Like, especially if you're a concept artist, like no one's gonna pay you to find reference of that stuff. So instead, you're working with imperfect reference. You've got maybe a picture of a pumpkin, and you've got a picture of some leaves, and you've got a picture of some gown somebody's wearing, and then you're trying to sort of composite it all together in a convincing way. And for me to do that in stages, it's just a lot more likely that I can kind of figure out, like you said, the puzzle, right? Thinking of it like a puzzle. I realize I think we borked the backside of this hourglass here. We'll have to deal with that later. Don't make it realistic, make it believable. Yeah, that's a really good phrase. Exactly. The pursuit of realism when you're talking about, art is I don't know, man. It's a rabbit hole. It's a dangerous rabbit hole. It's a dangerous rabbit hole, because you end up kind of getting into this uncanny valley situation, and it starts to look really kind of stiff, and it's like, why am I painting this? Like, why don't I just go take a photo of somebody in a costume? Like, I know I just mentioned like some subject matter you can't find a person to take a photo of, but uh there is like a lot of sort of micro decisions that are going into a piece that should be making it stronger than what a photo could be, like whether it's little optimizations of light and shadow patterns, or little exaggerations of color, augmenting the quality of an edge, making something maybe softer or sharper than it would be in real life. I mean, if you think about some of those amazing portrait painters, and they take the backside of the head and they just sort of, make it disappear into the background. It's like, well, that's not happening in a photo, right? But boy, does it look great. It really adds a lot of depth. Yeah, exactly. Loose edges, lost edges, fragmented edges, all sorts of weird tricks going on. Taking a shape completely into a graphic, just shadow block, right? Like that takes some real confidence to try and do that. That can be really powerful. I'm trying to get more comfortable doing that. That's why I went into exploring a whole kind of graphic look with my work. I started doing almost like a kind of comic inked look because I was wanting to understand a little bit more of the thought process, the mantra behind when you can lose things completely in just a graphic shape. Because coming from a 3D background and a conceptual background where you really see everything a lot of times, um, the tendency is to just, yeah, have very kind of flat lighting and stuff. So it's like, well, yeah, when can we maybe use some illustrative principles here to just push things a bit further? And it's cool when you think you've found a style that you can explore that helps you kind of work on some of your weaknesses, right? And it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to find those things. And sometimes maybe there's a style that would help you a lot, but it's maybe too big of a leap from where you're currently at. So you need to find some kind of bridging style, bridging technique to get you closer. That's a thing as well. Some of this stuff I think I'm hopefully a little bit better at, having worked as a teacher and mentor and curriculum developer of curriculum for people trying to learn this stuff. I think I'm better at assessing like how to learn and what to point people to, and then it helps me too, right? Because I can look at things and figure out how do I grow and how do I kind of connect the dots for myself on some of this stuff. Oh gosh, we're so close on this ambient shadow pass. Think that, I'm sure I'm forgetting something and we'll probably realize it later, but I think maybe that might be a really good, just comprehensive pass on those ambient shadows for the moment until again we recognize we missed something. I'm going to bring in just a little bit of ambient shadow underneath the roots here, and then I'll show you guys kind of like those critical tweaks so we can get this feeling a little more dialed in, because inevitably this first pass for me is always lighter than it wants to be. I kind of like sneak up on the shadows, and we definitely don't want to be leaving some of that contrast on the table. You're gonna start Sketch Saga. Oh man, that's exciting. Yeah, man, dude, good luck with that. That's don't give yourself the burden of like, you know, don't hit it too hard. Ease your way into it. Give yourself a ramp there. Are you gonna do it? Are you gonna do it digitally or what? Are you gonna do any on paper? I feel like you don't have to be consistent about that, right? You can mix it up a little bit. Ooh, you know what? This root feels like it's kind of lifting off the ground. Maybe we'll put the shadow like this. Yeah, that's cool. Only digital? Yeah, I mean that's fine. If it's the decision between doing it digitally or not doing it at all, then do it digitally, right? Like get some stuff done. Um, all the pieces that I sort of take further, like the more complex designs, things that I'm coloring and painting and lighting and stuff like that. It's all digital just because of the convenience, right? Like it's just so much easier, and I can make tweaks and changes. But Some of the practice work that I do traditionally because it's a little bit simpler. It's focused on just like, proportions and anatomy or simple designs in line, exploring fitting forms together. If it's something where I don't intend on taking it further, I'll see that as like an outlet or an excuse to do something on paper. All right, so we got some ambience underneath the roots. Let's take this back up here and turn off our muted layer. It's always so like jarring to see it go from muted colors to full colors. And then we can kind of adjust our ambient shadow here. We got a little carried away with that. And now we're going to dupe our ambient shadow pass. And we're going to dupe it again, but I'm going to kill the hue saturation on that one. We're going to lower the opacity of this one. Just going to kind of check our value range. Yeah, so that should be fairly receptive to the next passes that we're going to do. I feel like, we don't have a whole lot of time left for this stream. So maybe rather than getting into something like a key shadow, which I want to kind of maybe go from beginning to end in one sitting for something like that, let's maybe start adding some textures and gradients to the colors here. I feel like that'll be super fun. And I won't feel like we maybe need to do all of that all in one sitting. I can kind of pick that up again next time easily. So first thing is, let's just go with this big cape here. And so we're going to go with some classic micro noise. Again, I like to kind of just play around with some of this stuff here until I get something that I like. Go a little bigger with that. Let's go a little lower. Okay, that looks kind of cool and interesting. And if you guys don't know how to make your own tiling textures, well, you should come to CG Spectrum, where I teach and where we show you how to do all that kind of stuff. It's really helpful. Let's see, rasterize layer style. Let's get a swig of water. I've been talking for a while. All right. Let's do the robe. And so, some people may look at this sort of texture pass and they might think, well, that's cheating. Like you're using these like overlays. It's like, well, there is no skill in like me learning how to paint noise, right? Like this is just noise, right? Like I could come in here with a cloud brush or a grunge brush and paint this stuff in here. Um, but I don't need to do that, right? There's no skill in that. It's just a waste of time. And this is much more efficient. So yeah, it's kind of how I look at all processes. Is is there some valuable skill that I'm gaining from this? If not, then maybe I should find a shortcut, right? Maybe I should find a better way to execute that. And yeah, painting micro textures, yeah, just not a great place to spend time. So let's see here. Now, the key with patterning with tiling textures is that if you make them too small and repeating, you obviously notice the tiling, and that's a problem. So you want to play with the scale slider here. You can see here, here's my layer style. I'll just choose a sort of repeating pattern, adjust the angle and the scale. I can change the blending modes. It's really quite versatile. It's really nice. And what you'll notice here is that it really adds a lot of interesting depth to what was otherwise a very kind of boring color there. And I might lower the opacity a little bit on that overlay. Let's see. Let's go for. And there's no reason you can't do multiple of these, right? Like we can go ahead and rasterize this pattern overlay. And now we can go back and turn another one on. And, here I'm just repeating the same one over again. But what if we changed it now to be this one? And we brought this in, and maybe we made the scale a lot smaller. So we get some like micro noise, right? Some little, now I don't know that I'm going to do this, but I'm showing an example of how you can layer these on top of each other and you can get some really complex things going on, which is super, super cool. And then when you merge this at the end and you paint on top, you can easily come in and you can sort of sample from some of those weird little color things that are going on, and maybe simplify some spots that feel like there might be too much obvious repetition. We might come in with some specific overlays to create some effects that maybe mimic a little bit of grunge on the bottom. I'll actually show you guys a way to maybe do that without having to bring in a unique element. So what I'll do here is I'm going to take this flat color that I have for the row. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to white it out. Then I'm going to put a pattern overlay on it. And I'm going to set the pattern overlay to normal and 100% opacity. And I'm going to find one that I feel like is giving me a good sort of grungy quality to the bottom of the where it might be kind of touching the ground and getting tattered and gross. So some of these, again, we're had to play with maybe the angle and the size. Like this one's got a really weird kind of squared, almost like a camo thing going on. I don't know that I'm in love with that. Okay, that might be kind of interesting. Let's see. No, that one's not working either. That's the one we already used. Let's see about this one here. Okay. So let's say we liked that. I'll rasterize the layer style there. Now I'm going to desaturate it because I don't really care about the color information in this case, but you could leave the color information. Now we'll mask the whole layer and invert the mask so we hide all of it. Now we're going to paint into the mask with a grunge brush. So we're sort of taking two elements of texture now. We're taking the layer information itself as well as the noise of the brush we're using to reveal that layer to add double aspect of texture going on. And here you can pair it with whatever kind of grunge brush you like, but here I'll probably play with this one, and we can kind of selectively reveal parts of that other layer. And if you want to see what you're revealing, you just shift click it to see what you're working with. Now it might be that we want that to actually be the inverse. Maybe we like the texture, but maybe we want all the dark parts to be light parts to be dark, whatever. We can come in here and we can really tweak this thing and make it whatever we want it to be. And we can inject some interesting stuff on the edge here. And I don't know if I think this particularly works great in this case, but I'm showing you kind of a little bit of a process here for this. It could be cool to mess with a little bit. And then once you've got some of this stuff revealed, then you can tweak that layer with the mask, revealed here, and see how it's looking. Like maybe we go just darker with all of it, right? Maybe that's better. It just feels more like grungy that way. Some of this stuff does come from like 3D workflows, right? Like finding ways to build interesting patterns and things without having to infinitely source unique originals is really pretty valuable. Oh, really? Lorthamar's in there? Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that guy. That guy's armor is intense, man. I mean, I think it's well, number one, it's really a cool design. I think the updated design was done by Luke Mancini. At least that's the reference images that I was given for that character. He's obviously gone through a few iterations over the years, but his, I think, newest variant was done by Luke. And yeah, as with all of those really bulky Warcraft armors, they're particularly tricky when the characters are doing action poses. And so, of course, I had an image where it was like, we want a dynamic perspective. Well, they didn't say this. Like, it was sort of my own. The image description warranted a dynamic feel to the image. I'll just say that. And so I was like, okay, we need to have this at a dynamic angle. And clearly he's in battle, so he needs to be doing some kind of action pose. And then we need to drape this like crazy, massive, thick, ornate armor on top of him. And in the game, you don't really care because stuff's clipping through other things, right? When they're doing the cinematics, I really appreciate the challenge that they have of trying to kind of adapt some of that stuff. But you'll notice that in cinematics where things are more realistic, a lot of that stuff gets kind of thinned out, right? Because it has to animate better. And with something like a Hearthstone image, it's like, well, we actually want it to look faithful to the in-game sort of chunkiness, that sort of whimsical bulk. Um, but we need to see it in a way where it doesn't have any of the issues that it would have in game. So it kind of creates this like really weird sort of point of friction. Things that you really wouldn't think about unless you were actually painting an image like that. Did, oh yeah, were you seeing that in the cinematic trailer a little bit? Let's give this vest a little bit of a treatment here. I feel like we can definitely spice that up. Definitely not that one. Let's try. Oh, that one's kind. Let's do a subtle. Oh yeah. Oh, that's nice. Oh yeah. Look at that. I love how that looks right there. That looks really good. That's the other thing about the pattern method, right? Is that if you were to paint in the noise with the grunge brush or something, you might paint it and then you might be like, I don't like it there. Okay, erase. Okay, let's paint it again. No, I don't like it. Let's move it. And I feel like there's a lot of manual experimentation, whereas with the pattern, you're just like, okay, move the scale around, rotate it, change the blending mode. I feel like you can see a lot of options very quickly. Uh, and again, with the micro textures, yeah, I feel like it's just a quicker way. That's how I'm feeling about it today. We'll see how I feel about it tomorrow. It's not in the trailer. Oh, that's good. Yeah, like I said, I think that most of the times they do a pretty good job of trying to make sure that the trailers don't show any kind of weirdness like that. But I need to go watch that. I know that that's a pretty big announcement for them. That new expansion and everything. Yeah, but if you're trying to draw those guys in a dynamic pose, definitely uh, you got to kind of acknowledge the challenge of that. Man, that same one is working really well for the arm there too. I really like that. I think we'll just leave that. That looks cool. Um, what we didn't do is we never filled in. Did we pick a color for the teeth? Did we just do? I think maybe we didn't do. I think we just forgot to do the teeth. Whoops! What just happened? We lost our stuff here. Let's pull this back up. There we go. Let's save just in case our computer's getting a little squirrely. And what I was looking for was the teeth. Oh, you know what's going on? It's because I didn't rasterize the skin layer style. So this is I think I maybe have mentioned this previously, but pattern overlays like this that are high res that you're tiling a lot, they completely murder the Photoshop performance. It's like unusable basically. So you have to rasterize as you go, sadly. Okay, what's going on with the teeth here? I think we just sort of forgot to do those. So let's first of all let's give them a little bit more of a reasonable brightness, and then let's go into the shadow layers and render that out. I can go with the base layer, I guess. Is this Oh, right, right. This is not in the mask. There we go. Ah, I did paint them. Okay. Yeah, we just we had a mask that was trying to fool us, but it did not succeed. Not today. Yeah, you like the veins? Cool, man. Thanks. Thanks. I was going for like a kind of a swamp thing sort of a vibe there. All right, what do we do now? Oh, we could put a little bit of texture on this metal here for the scythe. I find the layer, there it is. Let's name that layer. Definitely want some grunginess on that metal. What sort of overlay do we like? I need to expand my library of these. I tend to have like my favorite, 7 or 8 that I cycle through. It's interesting. Um, oh, that's kind of fun. What if we made the scale a little larger? Okay. Pull that back a little bit. That's kind of interesting and fun. I like some of the color variation. It might be a little too intense, but that's okay because we can just, well, we can tweak it a little bit. I don't know. I kind of just like it. It's bringing in some little hits of pink and green that I feel like relate to the rest of the image. So yeah, let's leave that. Let's leave that. Again, we may paint over some of that in the end. There's going to be just a lot of other passes. So the other thing I find is that if you're going for kind of a little more of a realistic render, that base pass of texture, you can be pretty heavy about it. If you intend on painting over later, it's like, yeah, just basically have fun with it, right? Like don't feel too afraid. All right, cool, man. Yeah, have a good one. All right, let's see. Let's do did we do, I guess, yeah, so there's a little bit of texture on that. Yeah, let's do the pumpkins. That seems like another natural choice here. I think we did even have that on there at some point. Okay, that's those guys there. Change it up a little bit. Scaling down. Sure. And let's see how that looks on this one here. Whoa. Okay. It's a little intense on the full deal. I think that the sort of like linear nature of it is just a little too noticeable. But I like something like that is pretty nice. Maybe we'll play with the angle a bit. Ooh. Oh, that's pretty nice right there. Yeah. So you can kind of see how it just creates a little bit of that breakup, right? Just kind of fragments the surface a little bit. Cool. I am happy with that. We're going to merge those down or rasterize those rather. And let's do the wood. This one, what layer is this on? There it is there. Mm. Oh, yeah, that's pretty nice. Oh, yeah, look at that. That looks super cool. Cool. All right. Yeah, that's an easy choice. Got texture on that bottom part there. Yep, it textured the roots down here as well. We can do the bandages. Let's do those. Yeah, I kind of like that same one on there. Yeah. We need this piece here. What is this? That's, I guess I called it the shoulder wrap. Okay, now that one's not correct for that piece. So let's try. Ooh. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and then maybe we because the it's kind of saturating it a little bit too much. So let's rasterize and I'll just pull the saturation down a bit. I want it to live kind of in between the pumpkin saturation and the vest. I guess the other thing to mention too is if you were to paint traditionally, you get all kinds of texture for free. You know, the brushes, the paint itself, the canvas, right? All this stuff is giving you like free texture. And in digital, you just don't have any of that. So if you're trying to get stuff to feel a little bit more textured, it just requires that you put some real effort into it, right? You gotta make it a part of your process. Now I'm doing the stems. I love it. That looks so cool. Now we need to maybe make it a little bit more. Well, let's see. Yeah, it's a little bit more green without the pattern overlay. So let's rasterize, and we'll just shift it to be a little more green. Yeah, there we go. Okay, good. Yep. Now, what's cool about this is we can still go to grayscale. We can still maybe adjust local values generally if we don't feel like there's a good read going on. Like maybe the cape and the robe are not reading separate enough. And this is something that can happen once you start adding a lot of lighting into the scene, right? Like things might just start to kind of get muddy, or they might kind of fuse together, and you may have to go a little stronger with some of the local value differences going on. So if we make it lighter, that helps it read more. But we could also make maybe the robe a little bit lighter. I mean, that's how bright we'd have to go if we really wanted it to read. And it's kind of cool because we can see over here the effect of that, right? We can see. But I think interesting. I am going to try something. Let's merge that together. I'm going to try to blend this. I'm curious. This is a total experiment, and I don't know if it's going to work. So here we go. This might not be the right brush for this, but yeah, I'm not liking that brush. But I think there might be something kind of cool going on here. Whoa, that's crazy. Oh, that's not right either. Nope. These are a little bit too harsh. Whoa. Okay, yeah, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just wanted a little bit of noise to this here. So I think what I'm going to do in the final render is I'm going to have a few extra roots that are sort of like punching through the robe in a few selective spots. I think that'll be fun to play with. But yeah, I think I was wanting something a little bit kind of louder there, and I like the way the lighter sleeves are reading up here against the cloak. Creates more contrast up at the top part of him, the upper part of his body, and I think that reads a little bit better. I think what we could do now is we could take the vest, maybe pull the brightness down on the vest a little bit. Okay. Yep. The wraps here are feeling a little bit too saturated. Let's go a little bit less saturated there. Yeah. We're on a roll here, but yeah, I unfortunately I have to wrap things up. I would love to keep going with this, but I feel like we hit a really good milestone with this piece during the stream where we wrapped up all of the ambient shadows, and now we're starting to play with gradients and textures. And I think next stream we'll throw in a key light. I think that'll definitely allow us to give a little more dimension to this. We'll be able to maybe help this arm stand off a bit more. So I think there'll be definitely some benefits to adding that in. And we can start adding some reflections and maybe adding some other lights in. Who knows? We got to get some effects happening. But one of the things I like to kind of strive for is to have the piece be interesting and cool without relying on glowing effects making it look good. Right? It's stuff that's fun to paint, and it certainly looks impressive, but you don't want the piece to fall apart when those things aren't present. So we're going to sort of treat this, we're going to think about it, we're going to have it in mind, but we're also going to make sure that it works without that stuff so that when we add it, it's just that it's that cherry on top, right? So I think that's a really good way to approach things like effects and any kind of like smoke and mirrors kind of stuff that you might do in the later phases of a piece. All right, so that's going to wrap up the stream. I am super amped at how things are looking. I'm definitely excited to keep going with this thing. So I hope you'll join me for next time, and I think we'll be able to hopefully get really far in the next stream as well. So guys, consider subscribing if you aren't for more fun, chill art streams. You can just put me on in the background while you're doing something creative. And if you're curious about my free drawing guide, just sub to the channel, and then you can follow the link in the community tab. I've got a post in there. You can click on the link and get the drawing guide. You saw somebody mention that earlier. It's called Sketch Saga. It is a drawing guide that is not intended for beginners. I'll mention that. There's a lot of beginner drawing guides out there. There's courses at like CG Spectrum for drawing for beginners. This is more of a way for somebody who's already on the artistic journey to just give them a direction, and give you some goals to hit and to put you on a road of continual development. So if you're curious about that, if that sounds interesting, definitely check that out. I'd love to hear your feedback on it. And otherwise, I will hopefully catch you guys next time. Take care, everybody.